Hi, I'm Valerie Bealle. I'm at the Cool Tool Studios, and I'm going to show you 3 ways to set small CZs, 2.5 mil and under, into metal clay. Okay, I'm going to set some really small CZs. They will be 2.5 mil or less. They are not cabochons, they're all cut stones. People tend to have difficulty setting them. And I'm going to show you how to do it successfully in 3 different ways. Each one has its advantages and disadvantages. Okay, I'm going to use a number 5 rolling frame and roll out a patty. I use a pencil point, a fairly sharp pencil point, to make my little holes for the stone to go in. I take my stones and I slide them with the forceps, which tends to turn them upside down. You want to pick them up upside down and then flip them over. Be careful not to squeeze too hard, because they will surely go airborne. And it may happen to me while I'm working. Okay, so I've put the 3 stones in, and now with the tip of the forceps, I'm going to push them down. The important thing is that the stones, the girdle of the stone goes underneath the clay, and I'll show you what the girdle of the stone is. Here is a huge diamond worth $1 million. And this flat area is the girdle of the stone. The way the setting works is the clay must come slightly above the stone, so when it shrinks over the girdle and traps the stone in place. So this is how you set. And it must be a number 5 rolling frame. If it's any thinner than that, the stone will be pushed out when it goes into the kiln. So this you don't want. This is a very nice, clean setting. If you're using a texture plate, though, you must be very well aware that if there's a bump on the texture, that bump is going to be a hollow in your clay. So I have a texture plate that's very good for this. This has a hole, and I would put the stone in that hole because the clay would be very thick right there. The same is true of the antique molds. You need a hollow in the mold to give you the thickness that you need when you roll in. Okay, so that's the first way. It requires very little extra equipment, very little anything. You just push it in and you use something to make the hole properly. The next way, and I'll use this same spot, is to use syringe clay. And syringe clay, you don't put a tip on the syringe, and you squeeze, and you need much more than you think. And of course it's not sticking, but that's all right. And you're going to, again, take your piece, and here you don't need anything other than placing it into the lump of syringe and pushing it down well. It looks awfully big. You can see it's a little bit messy, but the thing that it's very good for is working in a small crevice, because if you can squirt the syringe into the crevice, you can get the piece in. And generally you would be working on a dry piece when you're doing this. That's the easiest thing to do. Okay, I will show you how to, and I'm going to take this syringe off because I don't want it. I'm going to show you how to do the bezel setting where you're creating a bezel. In this case, I'm going to roll my clay 7 or 8 cards thick. It is less expensive to work in the clay than it is syringe, so that's one reason to do it, and it's also cleaner and neater. So we're going to roll this out. And I'm going to use a little tube. These come in wonderful little sets. I use these tubes a lot. This is the large size. It has 3 different sizes, a pusher and a cork. And I'm going to take my cool slip and I'm just going to squirt it on the side of my work surface and put the end in. And I'm going to push down and pull up quickly. Now I can take these little patties and peel them out. And I have perfect little patties. Okay, I'm going to take my clay. I'm going to wrap it in saran wrap and put it back. If the clay had not come out easily when I punched it, there's this little thing that you put in to clean it out. Okay, so I'm going to take these and stand them on end. And I've used flex clay because flex clay really can sit for a long time, and I do a lot of work with these tiny CZs. And what this allows me to do is to almost mass produce the CZs in their settings. I'm going to take a pencil and then again pick up the CZ. I'll transfer these to a tough card so that they're on a slightly less slippery surface, so I can press them in place. And in fact, you could do the whole thing on a tough card. So you're going to push straight down until the stone hits the ground. And you'll see the stone belly out like a donut kind of, not the stone, but the setting. Now you have tiny bezels with stones in them. These can be set aside and dried and kept for later use, or they can be all used right then. Because the flex clay doesn't dry out very quickly, you really could do 20 of them in a row without any problem, where most of the other clays you would have a problem doing that number. I'm going to show you now some pieces that have the different types of settings. One of them are just test pieces. This one is flush set. This one is syringe set, and this one is handmade bezels. You can see how much neater the bezels are. The problem with the syringe, although it looks pretty good, is you can get so easily into a situation where you didn't quite use enough syringe and the clay pieces pop out. It is very good for getting into a groove or somewhere where you want to squeeze in some stones and there isn't much room, where once the little bezels are dry, they're not going to be able to squeeze in at all. You turn over the bezel, and what I do is I turn all of them that I have over, and I put my brush into paste, and I just touch the paste onto the back of it and lift them and put them in place on my dry piece, and that works just beautifully. You can do an awful lot in very little time. I'm going to show you some of the things that I've done with with all three methods. This one, I've done flush set here, and I've done the tiny bezels here. One of the nice things about the tiny bezels is they can be pasted to the edge of something and just sort of be floating on the edge. I think that's a real advantage. Here's one that is syringe set, and I used a tip. You can see how messy it looks. All of the tiny bezels that are created are rough and I think rather unattractive, although if you were doing a piece that you wanted to have a very rustic look, that might work. Here's a piece where I have batched the little bezels together, and you can see that they form a perfect little center, and there's a lot you can do with batching them closely like that. And the last thing, which I think has huge possibilities, I've done the little bezels, and I've used them to hold two pieces of silver clay together. And I think that that really has its values. The gold on these is gold plating. You know, I'm not using gold clay here. But this works wonderfully, and you could do all kinds of things. Obviously, I'm using this little tube. I could use any size. In other words, I could make really big bezels. I could make big bezels and decorate the tops of them. I could do all kinds of things. The possibilities here for different looks are enormous. I could have put a whole line of syringe right there and pressed stones all the way into it as long as it was thick enough. So these are the ways that I set tiny stones, and I set a lot of them. The bezel using the tiny tube is my preferred way, but there are reasons to do the other ways too.
Visit our Learning Center at cooltools.us for more cool jewelry making videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to sign up for our email list to be the first to hear about new videos, new products, and other cool stuff from Cool Tools.